Hey guys, welcome to the latest monthly update. Landon McKernan, Mark Cassell. We've got some awesome topics that we're going to be going over today. First one is going to be actually highlighting a Costar article that we did want to go over. Obviously going over the recent economy, where consumers are at, and looking at more of a macro scale, if you will. So the title of the article is Glum Consumers Turn to Retail Therapy. We'll include the link as well. So consumer sentiment, despite the economic conditions, has actually improved a little bit with potential interest rate cuts. That has improved some consumer confidence. Retail sales are surging a little bit despite economic concerns. Obviously, this being an election year, that's on a lot of people's minds. And then we have also seen another indicator of the health of the economy is actually car sales rebound. So the largest month-over-month gain was in July at 3.6%. And June actually had a decline mainly due to a cyber attack. So definitely interesting to see. And then the other indicator is definitely the housing market, which is a little bit in a state of stagnation. So that's kind of where we're at currently in the market, and a good article to overview that as well.
Yeah, things are definitely going well with a lot of businesses we're talking to. I know when we go to a building, meet with business owners, they're generally jam-packed, busting at the seams, ready to expand. Yeah. So in general, they're doing well.
I agree.
Moving on to some of the labor market and interest rate statistics. So they just came out with a stat. The U.S. added 818,000 less jobs than previously estimated from March of 2023 to March of 2024. I know they've been revising the numbers just about every month downward. So it's a little bit worse than initially expected. The
Seems
total
like can't get it right, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. The total employment growth was 2.9 million expected for the year, but is now coming in closer to 2.1 million jobs. And because of that, unemployment spiked to 4.3%. It's actually the highest level since October of 2021. Wow. Which for some people is a good thing. That means we might start to see some interest rate changes here soon.
Exactly.
And in 2023, I thought this stat was most surprising. Nearly 25% of all the job gains were actually attributed to government jobs.
Interesting.
And we've seen a wave of layoffs both in technology and finance jobs over the last couple of years. So it's interesting what the consequences of that really is, considering the tech jobs and finance jobs are probably higher paying.
Yeah.
And obviously the government can keep creating jobs in order to make the number appear better.
Exactly.
And the thing that people are really looking forward to the most is the Fed Chair Jerome Powell actually said the time has come to lower interest rates during the central bank's last annual conference in Jackson Hole. Cuts likely to kick off next month, should be 25 basis points at the meeting here in mid-September.
Yeah, should be interesting to see how it unfolds. Next thing we did want to cover is actually something that I don't know why it's been coming up just in the last couple of months, but I think it does need to be discussed, and it's broker etiquette on tours. Just a few things that we've noticed with other brokers that we're seeing. Obviously, we'll leave names out of it, but
sometimes residential agents,
sometimes residential that are trying to do commercial, but that can be discussed at a later time. But the first thing is passing out your business card to another broker's client. Obviously, a big no-no. Doesn't really portray well, and you're really starting off that relationship not on the best foot. Another thing is showing up to a listing or a building that's occupied by someone unannounced completely, especially if it is by appointment only. Obviously, people don't want their businesses interrupted, and showing up unannounced isn't really ideal.
Yes. Sometimes we'll get that call from our landlord or seller. Hey, so-and-so is here to see the building, but we didn't have a tour.
Exactly.
So it's always a surprise.
Definitely. And then if a buyer or a tenant is actually at the property before their broker representation is there and they want to see it, make sure that you actually keep them waiting. You want to make sure that their actual broker is there to walk them through. That's what they're there to do. It's their job to show them through the space, answer any questions, as well as having the listing broker there too. So, yeah.
Now we're going to talk about just Phoenix market overview in general. So obviously we've covered some of these topics in the past. We're seeing a huge supply increase, especially on the big box industrial market. So the total deliveries, which pretty much means new buildings hitting the market over the past 12 months, hit an unprecedented 40 million square feet. It's a huge number. And for comparison, Phoenix only averaged 8 million square feet annual deliveries prior to COVID for the previous 3 years. That being said, we still have really strong demand. There's still a lot of people moving here. Business is going well. So we're still one of the major hubs for transport and logistics in the country. And actually the third most in the country as well. So still way more products hitting the market than being absorbed. And that's causing the vacancy rate to shoot up from 4.1% in 2022 to 11% today. Wow. So we've nearly tripled that number. And 90% of that recent construction actually focused on buildings larger than 100,000 square feet. So
wow,
everything that we've been talking about with the big box industrial hitting the market while they're not really building the small bay or infill product. So if you do own that small bay product, you're doing well. You won't have to worry about too much in the coming years.
Yeah, it's interesting to see now, this is something that we talked about 6, maybe even like 10 months ago. Now it's just starting to unfold, which is, kind of what we predicted.
Yeah,
so.
And should continue to unfold for the next 12 to 18 months until all these buildings hit.
Exactly. Next thing we did want to go over, obviously it being an election year, did want to talk about that a little bit. Ryan Serhant, who's actually a high-end residential agent out of Manhattan, actually put together a pretty good article just going over what to expect for an election year. And obviously people get a little bit nutty, so it's good to bring things back down to earth. So wanted to go over the Federal Reserve's role in that article. So obviously the Fed's decisions on interest rates are based on economic conditions and not political events like elections. The Fed aims to maintain economic stability regardless of whoever's in office, and obviously the executive policy impact. So while a president's policies can influence the housing market, these can change time to time as well. Structural issues such as housing, inventory are obviously long-term changes that can't immediately be fixed through an election. Obviously, supply and demand is a huge factor as well. Don't really need to drill into that too much. And then historical data actually shows that home prices and sales often rise after presidential elections, which is, I feel like, contrary to popular belief. But this is more so correlation rather than causation. And focusing on the current economic data as well, this is super important in an election year. So understanding the real estate market movements, it's essential to focus on economic data and policies rather than sensational headlines related to the election.
Yeah, I know from our conversations, there's a lot of fear out there with everyone we're talking to, regardless of what side you're on. But the reality is things aren't going to change overnight and likely not to change drastically either way.
Exactly. Cool.
So we did want to cover a topic that we thought would be interesting for people that aren't in the brokerage world to hear about, just to put yourselves in our shoes for a minute. So getting into sort of the less desirable parts of brokerage, to put it politely. People don't often realize that we make a lot of cold calls. There is a lot of rejection out there, and that's just part of the game. It is a numbers game at the end of the day, but we really try and offset that by providing value on our calls and outbound emails too. And occasionally we will get some hang-ups or not friendly texts or emails. Another thing that comes up once in a while is we're pitching with an owner and it doesn't go our way. Either they're talking with another broker and we don't know about it, or they're just not as transparent with us. Another thing that can happen is you put multiple calls into an owner over the period of years and they just don't call you back. That's going to be part of it too, but eventually the time does come and they'll remember your name, reach out.
Exactly. Staying on top of it.
Exactly. And then we are in a cyclical business too. So when the market's doing well, we're doing well. and when the market's slow, it does affect us a little bit too. So especially if we have deals fall through, you could go through a period of time where you're not making as much money.
Yeah.
You might have a few months that you're not bringing in any income.
Yeah. There's definitely a silver lining to it as well. I mean, a lot of the more, I'll call it gray-haired brokers, more experienced brokers, if you will, traditionally say they actually end up making more in down cycles than they do in the upswings, mainly because of less competition, and there's sometimes a little bit more deal velocity. Granted, it's a little bit lower pricing, but it might be a little bit better at that point. So
yeah,
definitely something to consider.
I have heard a lot of veterans say that now's the time when things are slow to really put in that extra work, because people are getting out of the business.
Exactly.
If you're forming those relationships when the market's back up or climbing, then you're going to be the guy.
Yeah, so true. We do have a counterpoint to that last. So what are the best parts of the brokerage? And Landon and I compiled a few things. So obviously, converting leads after years of follow-up. I've been doing this about 9 years, and some of the things that I'll see is calls that I made my first year in the business are finally coming to fruition, which is, I feel like, takes a lot of patience. A lot of people don't think about that. You do have, quote-unquote, unlimited income potential. We are 1099 independent contractors at the end of the day. What you do put into the business, you do get out. Another thing that I think is super interesting, but I didn't necessarily know getting into commercial real estate, was the different personalities of commercial real estate. You meet people that are wildly successful entrepreneurs that turned super small businesses into these behemoths, and you would never expect it. They're very humble people, very driven, and I would say approachable, contrary to what people might traditionally think. You've got a lot of investors that come from different countries and all sorts of different backgrounds as well. So definitely, I would say, an added bonus to being in the business too. I would say being the master of our own schedule. This is something that I feel like is brought up a lot. We do have unlimited and unpaid sick days and vacation days, so definitely something to consider. But we do have that ability to spend more time with family and friends and work around traditional work schedules, which is nice. We've done meetings as early as 5 in the morning as well as late as 7 p.m. too.
And on the weekends sometimes too.
That's right, yeah.
But it's all worth it in the end.
That's true. Awesome.
So moving into a few recent trades, there's actually been a lot of activity out there, a lot of recent sale comps. So the first one's at 2215 and 2225 East Germain Road. That one's in Chandler. It's a 2-building multi-tenant flex warehouse totaling about 224,000 feet. Sold for $43 million or $192 per square foot. Warehouse was reinforced concrete, also called concrete tilt-up, and was built just recently in 2020.
Nice.
Features 14 grade level doors, 62 high dock doors, and 28-foot clear height. It's also zone PAD, has ESFR sprinklers, and shares a 175-foot concrete truck court. The next trade is 7300 East Hampton Ave. That one's in Mesa. It's just over 125,000 square feet. Advanced manufacturing building, sold for $17,500,000 or $140 a foot. That one's block construction, built in 1994 and renovated again in 97. Has a grade level door, 3 dock high doors, and 20 feet of clear height. But most importantly, it had 7,500 amps of power, which is just crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So anything you need to do can be done there.
Yeah.
And then the last trade's at 1503 West San Pedro Street in Gilbert, 68,000 square feet, sold for $17 million, $247 a square foot. So definitely up there on the price per foot. Had concrete tilt-up, built in 1986, and has a secured yard. Features 4 grid level doors, 24-foot clear height, 2,500 amps of power, and that one's situated on over 5 acres as well.
Wow. Yeah, it's a really nice building too. We've been seeing a lot of activity in the Southeast Valley. Actually, 2 trades on Hardy Drive in Tempe. First one is at 9213 South Hardy. Sold for about $2.1 million at $348 a square foot. It was more of a contractor yard play. And the second one was at 2735 and 2777 South Hardy. Actually sold for 25 million at just under 200 bucks a square foot. More of a cold storage play. But that covers it for this monthly update. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.